What's up, guys, and welcome back to the infamous project. Today's going to be an exciting episode because we're going to be wrapping up what a lot of you've probably been waiting for, and that is getting that freshly restored interior back in this car. And on top of that, we're going to be adding some new stereo and sound to this thing, which there's going to be a couple little tweaks that we're going to go through, and hopefully it will help answer some of your questions, show you guys some new tricks, and show you guys how to fix maybe a couple things that might have get cut, snipped, or bastardized in the past. So be sure to stay tuned, because this is going to be the video that is going to reveal the finished product of what the inside of this car is going to look like. So if you guys have been following along in the project, you would have noticed my last couple of outro videos finished here with all of the freshly dyed / restored interior pieces for the Cali Coupe, trying to give a little bit more contrast over what the stock look and feel would have come with, and freshen up the discoloration in the different panels that the gray interiors in our Fox bodies give. So now everything is consistent in terms of the gray, and looks really nice and clean. So I'm excited to put this in. I've already gone through and done little things, like painted up the little open, closed, and indicator dials. And of course the door panels, which we did custom inserts in by rewrapping those with some vinyl that we got off Amazon, re-dyeing the center section in the smoke or the Presidio gray, and then dyeing the top and bottom portions with the SEM Lando black. So needless to say, all of this stuff is ready to go back in the car. But before we put it back in the car, well, what about the stereo? Because I want to swap out the door speakers, I want to do some stuff in the trunk, new head unit, and well, now's the time to do it because all of the interior is out. So we can run our power cable, we can run our RCA wires and everything else back to the trunk here, which you can see the trunk lid is open, and there is a box here for two 10-inch subs. So on the table behind me here, I got a stack of everything, some wiring, I got a new head unit, new speakers, a box of Killmat, which we're going to get into here in a minute. But for now, here's the sub box, and it fits. This is a B box. I got this off Amazon. I forget how much it was. I'll look it up. I'll link it down in the description. But I wanted something that could fit two 10s that I could push all the way to the front. And that box right there was actually a truck sub box. So it's kind of on an angle. It's meant to go behind, your bench seat in your pickup truck. And I was going to use two shallow mount subs in that. And the problem was they actually lied about the dimensions on the description, go figure. And it's too wide, so it wouldn't fit between the two shock towers. And it was kind of unfortunate because it would have been slim enough to clear the tension rods that live in the trunk. So some of you guys, first thing you're saying, oh, how are you going to get that box in there? There's the tension rods that keep the trunk lid up, right? And you can see where they would hit the back of the box right there. So that obviously isn't going to work. Another thing is, this is where the rear speakers are, and I wanted a box that was narrow enough that will allow me to change those rear speakers and still have enough room for their baskets to come through the bottom of the parcel shelf, and enough room to get that box to slide all the way to the back. So how am I going to do it? Well, if you guys are familiar with convertibles, and some of you aren't because you hate convertibles, well, here is a reason to love convertibles. Convertibles don't have tension rods in the back because that is where the top comes down, and the top frame needs to be able to seat down in there when it's down. So what did they do? They had these external hinges, and these hinges mount in this general vicinity here and up in this mounting point up there. And what that's going to do is that's going to allow us to open our trunk lid, and it's going to stay up, which it wouldn't if we just removed the tension rods. So the only thing that we need to do in order to make these work, we need to drill one hole. not two, because we're actually going to reuse this hole, but we need to drill that one. So we will drill that guy out. We're going to unbolt these. We're going to bolt that guy in place, and we'll do the same thing on the other side. And from there, we should be able to snap our tension rods out. And once they're out, we should be able to slide the subwoofer box straight back. Now, I actually had to remove this latch in order to get the box in. It is just, it's a near miss. Like, it just barely fits, but it fits. And that's the most important thing of this whole project right here in terms of the stereo. So this is the first thing that I'm going to do because I want this to be rewarding. And once I have this bit sorted out and I know that sub box is going to fit in there, I will move in and start getting the interior back in. Let me tell you, with just one of those installed and the tension rod still in there, this trunk lid wants to go flying. So with that said, we're going to go ahead now, drill out the hole. We'll get the other hinge mounted on this side, and we'll do some test fitment. And we'll probably have to pull out the sub box at that point. We'll knock out those tension rods, and we'll see if our convertible hinge project is a success. All right, guys. Whew. That is one, like, I think I could launch a watermelon off this thing if I wanted to right now. Get the carpet up. There we go. It's going right into the back rod. There we go. Whew. There is going to be tension on them, guys, so be sure to note that. Whew. You can see someone was already kind enough to Killmat the whole trunk floor. And we saw that the inside was already done as well. Sub box slides in nice. Oh, and look at that, guys. We are in. We're tucked out of the way. We got room to change our speakers up here on both sides. So the funny thing, well, not the funny thing, but when I was younger and I wanted a big system, I wanted 212s in my first silver notch. And the only way to get a box for 212s was actually to remove the cross bracing behind the rear seat, take the seat back out, and slide the box in from inside the car. So I actually had it slid and it butt right up against this lip on the inside here. And I had my 212s facing, they were on an angle actually, so it kind of went down if I remember correctly. So the baskets kind of faced in on a diagonal up towards the back. This is obviously the nicer, cleaner way to do it. In reality, do you need more than 210s in your Foxbody? Probably not. We are getting older, right? So if we haven't already lost some of our hearing, maybe we do need a louder stereo because of that. But you know, I'm not trying to roll out and win a bunch of stereo competitions. I just kind of want to say that I did it and know that I have some good sound, and the sound is there if, you know, I want to turn it up. But the convertible hinges definitely work. The only thing that we had to do was drill one hole on each side. There is going to be a small modification on the rear plastics. I'm going to go ahead and probably pull the box out. We'll drop the speakers from the parcel shelf, and I'm going to get those swapped. We'll clean up in here. I want to get all that dirt and debris off the rear inner wheel wells here. So in terms of swapping these speakers, you can see there's little fasteners here. So we're going to loosen these guys off. And these ones are some aftermarket Pioneers. We're going to get rid of them anyways. And we're going to put in some new Infinities and should be good to go. guys, here's one of our new Infinity Kappa rear speakers. This is a 6x8. And the reason why I went with Infinity this time is because in terms of newer aftermarket stereo equipment, value for money, don't get me wrong, there's lots of cheap, viable options out there depending on how much sound quality you are ultimately after. These guys were about $100 if I remember correctly, and you know, they have a nice angled tweeter. You can set the tweeter if you want to add 3 dB. I like to add the additional dB in the tweeter. I love highs. Highs are my big thing. I like crystal clear, just like you can hear almost like, I don't know, PA system style, but not PA system. Here's the old Pioneers. The Infinities probably weigh twice as much as these Pioneers. Bigger magnet on the back, a lot more solid construction, webbed cone, nice rubber surround. This rubber surround feels much thinner and brittle than this guy does. And funny enough, it says custom fit for Ford and Mazda right on there. So don't get me wrong, this is a nice little upgrade. In most cases, guys, I never even put rear speakers in, usually just subs in the back in a really good component set up front with the 3.5s in the dash is enough to fill the cabin. But if for whatever reason I don't want the subs in here, or I take the box out, then I still want to have really good sound. So that's why I'm going to put the rear speakers in. You can see somebody's tapped in to the factory harness here, and that's all taped and clamped and wired up. I'm going to double check their connections and make sure they're good. If they're good, then I'm going to rock them. It looks like they did a pretty good job because they even put the little Christmas tree clip back in there. All right, guys, so I'm just checking up on the 12 volt here, making sure that all the colors are right. And you want to make sure you get your polarities right, especially on newer head units. And looks like here the left rear pink and green is positive, pink and blue is negative, which is funny because pink and blue is actually positive on the right side. So keep that in mind. You can double check this. I'll put the link in the description of the video. That'll make us know for sure that we got the right colors in the right places. So here we are down near the passenger door, and we got the factory dust shield here. So I'm just going to roll that back out of the way. You can see they put a couple pieces of Killmat in some random places here. Well, that's all fine and dandy, but what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put a piece that mimics kind of the speaker here. So it's going to kind of be almost like you want to draw an oversized version of the speaker grill, and cut that out. All right. So if you guys haven't dealt with Killmat before, it's super easy. It's pretty much peel, stick, and shape, or form, or whatever you want to call it or do. And I'm just going to put that right there. I'm going to fold it over this ledge, and you just put pressure on it and it'll stay in place. One thing that I'll do is I'll just kind of cut the contour out right here where the door panel will be. Stick that down. Then I'll just kind of cut across where the speaker goes, and then literally just going to push it down and wrap it around the speaker hole. Just like that. Be careful, because if somebody has chopped these to get a larger speaker in there at some point, then the edges could be sharp. There we go. Just kind of put some pressure on the back. So what this is going to do is this is going to kind of just give some really good insulation around the speaker, and things are actually going to sound better. You'll get better bass and just better overall sound out of that speaker. So one thing you're going to want to do after is cut yourself some pieces that you're able to work with, and we're actually going to stick them on the inner side of the door on the inside here. So you're going to have to get around your window run channel that's coming all the way down and stick that right in there. Grab a couple pieces. There's actually a few pieces of Killmat in there. They just kind of stuck some random pieces here and there, which is fine. It'll kind of reduce vibrations throughout the body panels. That helps with road noise and everything else, gives you a quieter feel in the cabin. But the reason why I'm going a little bit more extreme in this area is because the sound from the back of the speaker, the basket, it's going to project towards the door, and we don't want to rattle the door, and we want to keep as much sound, I guess, contained within around the speaker so that it will project the best sound possible. All right, so speaking of Killmat, here are the rear trunk liner plastics, and we are going to have to do a little bit of trimming in this area to compensate for our new convertible hinges. But what you'll notice is I've actually lined them with Killmat on the backside, and I cannot tell you, just from not only a sound insulation point of view, but in terms of giving these plastics a little bit more rigidity. If any of you guys know, you'll know how brittle and how fragile these pieces are. But here, I'll just give it a drop test. So listen to this. Right, not bad, but you heard how that sounded. Now listen to this. So it was more of a thump or a thud, and this guy's just more, rigid, right? If I do that with this, so what I did is I literally washed the back sides of all these plastics because normally they're full of dust and dirt and debris and everything else. And the same thing, guys, we're just going to be cutting pieces and taking our time molding them around the contours and the edges here, and we'll get this covered up with some Killmat.
Let the bass kick. Let the bass kick.
All right, guys, so for the door speakers, I'm going to show you guys what I do, because we have this factory harness clip here, and most people would just go like this and throw this away, and there we go. So we have a factory connector here, and in reality, if somebody took the aftermarket speaker out, they could just snip that wire off and they still have that connector. So I don't know, I just don't like to butcher stuff when I don't have to. I like to keep all the original options there. You just never know. Maybe you find out that this California car is some special ultra rare or something, and somebody wants to put it right back to original. Well, now they would have that option. So here's a little trick if you guys don't want to just go drilling. I use a self-tapping screw to start the hole because I find that they just drill so nice and easy. And well, I've broken most of my Harbor Freight bits, so I'll start the hole with the self-tapping one, and then I will screw in one of the screws that came with the speaker, and I'll just do one at a time. Another reason why I like the self-tapping head is because it's a 1/4 inch socket head, and you don't have the risk, or as much risk as you would with Phillips. And I know that somebody is watching right now that has gone to either screw in their speaker, their subwoofer, or they were drilling the hole and their screwdriver has slipped and gone through the surround. I know it's happened to somebody out there. I'd be lying if I told you it's never happened to me. It has happened to me. And it's probably one of the subwoofers that I fixed back in the day with shoe goo. So there you are. You always want to be careful with your rubbers, and you always want to play it safe. Routing our power cable through the firewall for the amplifier. I take a screwdriver and I pierce the big harness grommet right here. Just poke a screwdriver through like that. And then you might have to get creative with a pull wire or spray some WD-40, get your cable lubed up. Some people pop that grommet out and kind of run it around, and then the grommet's not fully sealed, so you allow wind and moisture and everything else to get into the cabin. Some people run things through the speedometer cable hole. Some people, I've actually seen them run cable through the door jamb and it's exposed, and then they run it inside sometimes, which is a huge no-no. So you could argue the best way to do this, some people would say drill your own hole and run a grommet and all those things, but I like this way, especially with an 8-gauge wire, because even if you remove the wire, that rubber for the most part is just going to seal itself back up once the wire's through, and when the wire is in there, it's pretty much sealed as it is already with the pressure from the rubber. So that is the approach I'm going to take in this case. All right, so now we need to do some amp mounting. Here's our amp, and about the best place that I would like to see it is mounted up in here. And some people would say, why don't you mount it to the subwoofer box? Well, if I mount it to the box and I want to take the box out for whatever reason, then I got to get into disconnecting the RCAs, the power, the ground, the remote wire, and I'd rather the amp stay with the car and only have to disconnect speaker wire. So I've found these brackets that I had laying around that came with IKEA shelves, the LAC style shelf. If you guys aren't familiar with it, ask your wives. Maybe you've purchased one or she's purchased one. I'm going to do a trim here where that blue line is, and I think I'm going to use some self-tapping screws and get it mounted right around there. I don't want to interfere with where the rear seat piece comes down, or maybe it's going to end up kind of sliding in between. So just got to kind of be conscious of that. The distance for the amp, I'm going to get one here, I'm going to get one here.
Let the bass, let the bass kick. Let the bass kick.
All right, so we got our amplifier mounted in the back there. Everything's turned out really nice. I'm happy with the way that it's sitting, and it's got, you know, a little bit of depth coming into the trunk, but it's still going to be the best location in terms of accessibility and mounting and everything else. Also want to head and Killmat the underside of the parcel shelf, so that will help with some, you know, noise quieting and reduction in rattles and everything else. So now that that's done, we can go ahead and get our inner panels mounted here, which these as well, we have Killmatted the rears. So in case anyone's gonna ask or say something in terms of the wiring, I ran 8-gauge and it's proper 8-gauge. The reason why I say proper is because the amount of wire, the thickness of the wire inside of the sheathing is in fact 8-gauge. It's not the wire plus the sheathing that's 8-gauge. So it's proper in terms of the thickness. It is full copper. It's not a different type of conductant that has copper coating, which means that it's going to be very efficient and clean power going through that 8-gauge. And in fact, the manual for the amp says anything greater than 10-gauge will do. Well, greater as in larger. So 8-gauge is fine. You know, you could run 6, you could run 4, hell, you could run 2 if you really wanted to, but you don't need to, guys. If you guys run a proper wire, now those Amazon kits, they're gonna say they're 8-gauge, they're really gonna be like a 10-gauge. So you have to keep that in mind. So the wire that I used was proper stuff, and it should be more than sufficient to power this amp and power the subs. The other thing about this amp is that it's actually rated just at 2 ohms. So both my subs are 4 ohms. So together they will bridge down and put the amp into a 2 ohm load. And if you guys are wondering, well, check out Ohm's law. And it might be a bit of a throwback for some of you guys trying to remember the whole, V over IR. But amplifiers these days, it's not as common that you see the 1 ohm stability or the half or quarter ohm stability that we used to see back in the day. It's just kind of the way that things are. In fact, the subwoofers have a button on them where you can change if you want them to be 4 ohm or 2 ohm.
The bass kick. Let the bass kick. Let the bass kick. Let the bass kick. Let the bass kick.
All right, guys, so I'm getting ready to put the dash back in the car, but before I do that, I'm actually going ahead and adding some new foam to some of the joints for the HVAC system. So like right here, you can see where I put a little self-tapping screw in here. I put a new piece on there. I put a new piece where it meets the vent over here. And I'm gonna do the same thing over here. I actually loosen the screw off. You can see it right here. That allows you to kind of move stuff out of the way. And although there's a hole here, like you could put a screw in, there's actually nothing holding that in place. You can see stuff can potentially move and vibrate and make noise, as these cars love to do in the interior. So I'm going to pull this out, I'm going to clean it up, and I'm going to add some foam around here, and I'm going to add a new piece of foam around here since this one's all deteriorated, and then I'll put a self-tapper through here, hold everything in place, and that way we will mitigate as much rattles as we can in this old Foxbody interior.
Let the bass kick. Let the bass kick.
All right, so the last of the stereo. And one thing that I do that I'm going to share with you guys is I actually take a small little square Killmat like this, and I create a little pocket in there. And what that does is, again, is just going to kind of contain the sound and help get that little tiny 3.5-inch woofer to project the right direction, i.e. forward towards you, and not lose a bunch of sound towards the back. So just kind of get your Killmat. Again, guys, like, Killmat isn't permanent. The butyl will come off if you need it to, but just kind of do like this and create that nice little pocket. One thing that you do want to be conscious of is make sure you don't lose your wires, like I almost did.
All right, guys, so on the head unit wiring, you can see that the head unit that was in the car, this old Pioneer CD player, they actually had an aftermarket harness adapter, which I am cutting out right now. And not all of us are so fortunate to have these installed in our cars. A lot of people back in the day literally cut the factory harness and just spliced all the wires in individually. So we're fortunate enough here, you can see they literally just twisted wires together with electrical tape to install this, which is not how we're going to do it. I am going to reuse this harness clip. And normally what I do is I have a couple pigtails that I've saved from over the years, and sometimes I wire the factory pigtails back in to the body of the car just so that way things don't seem as butchered. So in this case, thankfully, everything is still intact and we get to use these two guys. So one is for all your speakers and then the other one's for your power, you know, accessory wire, ground, and your remote wire that'll go to the amp. So all we have to do is take our new harness, which is here, and we're going to butt connect these all up, and everything should be pretty much plug and play. Alright guys, there we go. Nice clean harness. You guys could get some harness loom or whatever if you want to clean that up even more.
So if you don't have your rear plastic bolted in place, this is really easy to do, or you install it before the rear plastic is in there. It was kind of an afterthought for me because I just didn't even realize that these guys were torn. So better late than never. If you leave or take out the few screws just on the kind of B-pillar side of things, it gives you enough room with the rear plastic to maneuver the weather strip around. All right, so things are starting to come together here. You can see how nice the rug and the console and everything is looking. Got this one door panel on here, so everything is coming along nice. Door sill plate, I painted all the screws up. You can buy a screw kit, but you know, if you just paint those screws up, it makes everything look nice and fresh. So when I was down here and cleaning everything up, I found this. And if you guys have seen some of my other videos on these, on pre-90 cars, this is actually courtesy light. So, got some fresh LEDs here. There we go, guys. Nice glow underneath the dash. There's one on the driver's side, so I'll pop an LED over there as well. And nice little, I guess, modern feature.
Let the bass kick.
Nothing quite says you finish your interior like actually putting in Christmas tree clips and the kick panels. All right, so here we are. I'm wrapping up another day here, and I've pretty much finished the interior on the Cali Coupe. And for the sake of the video, it's pretty much done. I've documented and shown everything that I wanted to show you guys. Most importantly, I can give you that little snapshot of the end result and how the contrast between the smoke gray, aka Presidio SEM gray, and the black, aka SEM Landau black, turned out, and its contrast. You can see, got some booster cables and battery tender. Don't ask questions. It happens when you got the doors open for a prolonged period of time and you don't want to keep the battery disconnected because, well, I was doing a couple little trick things, like I wanted to get those courtesy lights all plugged in and working that shine in the footwell areas of the car, because why wouldn't you take advantage of such a cool option in these pre-90 cars that have those two little, you know, bulb outlets that are located underneath the dash. So if you guys have a pre-90 car, stick your head up underneath there, and if you see them, you know what, go grab some LEDs or whatever color or bulb, peanut bulb that you need, stick them in there. Makes for a really nice modern look, in my opinion. So behind me in here, you can see this contrast between the gray and the black, and I think it turned out great. It's one of those things that Ford probably should have did more of on the Fox bodies, you know, they did some pretty cool combos with the convertibles. They had the white and blue, white and black, white, red, white, gray, all of them really. They just never really mixed things up too much when it came to the gray interiors or the tan. The tans probably would have looked better if they just added a little bit more contrast to them. So anyways, here it is. Again, really happy with it. There's a few little things I want to touch up and just take care of, kind of tick off my own personal OCD boxes. But the stereo sounds phenomenal. I'm really happy with the way that turned out. Believe it or not, I had actually forgot to hook up the power for the amp at the positive battery terminal. And I had the volume turned up. I'm like, man, this thing pounds. But then I was trying to adjust the subwoofer level and I'm like, nothing's changing. Subs weren't even on. So once I connected that, man, this thing pounds. I can't send you or share with you guys really any real footage of that because anything I have is gonna scream copyright for YouTube, but you guys get the idea. The convertible trunk hinges turned out awesome and a great mod. I don't understand why more people don't take advantage of this, getting rid of those tension rods in the back. You can see how nicely the subwoofer box fits. I will link to it down in the description so you guys know which one I bought because I just barely snuck that thing by. You know, I had to take out the latch assembly here. I did clean up a little bit of surface rust that I found and got that all taken care of. So the trunk is clean and done. One thing that I do want to do though, is if you look back in there, you can kind of see the back side of the rear seat. I'm going to get some trunk carpeting and probably lay something or make a panel that goes across the back so that just if you happen to be squatted down and looking at that, you don't see, you know, the board and cross rails and all that other stuff. Of course, the amplifier was mounted using those IKEA brackets, so that's all hidden and tucked away. Also stuffed some LED bulbs and the license plate lights there, and we did all our LED conversion on the interior of the car, so the gauge clusters got LED lights. Of course, we got them down in the courtesy light area, the climate controls, the shifter bezel, the ashtray door, inside the glove box door. All of those bulbs have been changed over to LED. And of course, the dome light on the interior. So it makes for a nice, brighter, cleaner look through your cluster. I swapped out the cluster with the one from the parts car. So everything seems to be working and reading great there. So a few little things. Haven't bolted the seats in yet. They're loose, but these Corbeau front and rears, well, Corbeau fronts. And if you guys remember, I recovered the rear seats with the Corbeau covers. So those turned out pretty good. I think they just need a little bit of dust off because they've been sitting out in the shop. So they're dusty. So we'll get those cleaned up. And this whole interior theme is, I think, pulled off quite nicely. Finally, we added new weather stripping because obviously we want to make sure that the car is nice and sealed. And now I pretty much just have to focus on the outside and get this looking, sitting the way that I want it. So there's a few things. Be redoing some of the trim on the car. Some of it is good. Some of it needs to be touched up. Rear quarter windows need to be redone. And that's obviously the biggest thing to me that sticks out. And then finally, the wheel and tire setup. So these wheels and tires are not staying on the car. I got something else that's going to be going on it. And I'm excited for that and to share it with you guys. So be sure to stay tuned to see what's going to happen with the Cali Coupe. I know this has been a way longer episode than we were planning, but you know what? I think it was worth it. So thank you again for all your support, for following along, and be sure to stay tuned for more, not only in this car, but I got a couple more in here, right? So we'll see you guys next time here on the Infamous Project.